Yeah. Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to evening, everybody, and welcome to Spin Legal on December 11th, 2024. This is episode number 46 with Angela and myself, and we are partners at Invictus Legal LLP. Tonight, our topic is, could Canada survive a coup d'etat? Is basically looking at our legal rights and the Constitution, essentially. So just to let you know, if you need to contact us, you can do so at 905-688-5598. Or email Angela at angela@weareinvictus.legal, or myself at peter@weareinvictus.legal, or contact our website at weareinvictus.legal, if there hasn't been a coup already.
Yep, we're going to be putting an article about a coup, an upcoming coup.
Yeah. Okay. Why did this topic come about? There's been, in the last year, there's been coups in Syria. Well, actually, Niger, there was a coup. There's a new military leader there. Syria, Assad has just fallen in Syria. Syria's new regime, transitional Prime Minister Mohammed al-Bashir, is seeking democratic changes, including recognitions of other faiths. So there you go. Right. And so that's kind of, as I said, the Syrian regime collapsed, and basically it meant it's given the green light to Israel to expand beyond the Golan Heights.
Yep.
Right. So another thing to think about in the last week, there was a temporary imposition of martial law in South Korea. And actually, when we look outside of the West, probably South Korea is one of those places that we laud as being a democratic, a major democratic place. So we don't expect to see coups in South Korea.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. Hey, Betty Zoom.
Yeah, Betty's coming, saying good morning, good evening to us. Yes, Betty. So we got a St. Catherine's listener here, and welcome you. Okay, so there's the question of it. So these things like this in other parts of the world lead a lot of people to start thinking about what could happen here, especially since, hey, we got a Western nation and France is in turmoil. Is it 3 months? I think the new government is been in power.
Mm-hmm.
Now they've got a financial crisis in France. They do not have. They can't. Basically, there's been some questions there that are raising their ugly heads at the moment. We've also got Robert DePaul and Betty saying hi to Robert. There you go. Okay.
Yeah, we almost got a caucus revolt here, even against our current government, the Liberals.
Well, in fact, actually, it has to be said that not everything is stable here right now in our government. In the last month,
something the drinking water throughout the whole world that everybody's just in the mood for a coup.
Well, in the last month, there have been 4 attempts by the Conservatives to actually bring the downfall of the Liberal government, and 4 attempts that have failed, by the way. And I have to say that, in fact, I think, Mr. Polyev, it's the wrong time. We're not going into Christmas with an election on our plate, please.
No. Wait till the spring or the fall next year.
I'm going to say, wait until if you want to start challenge in January. Let's get something in January, maybe. All right. Hey, there we go. A lot of people out there. Okay, so here we go. So while a coup in Canada is theoretically possible, there are several factors that make it highly unlikely.
Like, and I think too boring.
We're too boring. That's probably true. That probably is true.
Like, wouldn't you want to go and do a coup somewhere in some tin pot dictatorship And really,
Actually, I have another thing, which is why we won't have a coup, because somebody climbed, the soldier marching up the steps of Capitol Hill, a trip on his rifle and go, "Oh, sorry," and walk away. That'll be the general, by the way, not the.
or
Not
they'll
the,
be looking for Toronto, where they got to start, and then they'll see a sign saying Toronto left, and then they'll turn around and go home. There has been a couple of attempts, though, in Canada.
Have they?
Yeah, the Upper Canada Rebellion,
Okay.
where reformers, including the mayor of Toronto, attempted to seize the bank, the legislature, and the courts in order to oust the family compact that controlled the colony's executive powers. They were unsuccessful, but reforms were made 3 years later. Then the other one was the Red River Rebellion, when French and Métis settlers around what's now Winnipeg set up a provisional government to seize power in the colony when Canada tried to assert authority over the area before taking legal ownership from the Hudson's Bay Company.
Okay, so is it called the Red River Rebellion because the river flowed red with their blood?
Probably. And then, of course, the leader of that was none other than Louis Riel.
Okay.
And some of us have taken the case of Louis Riel in our school days, in our history classes.
Well, there you go.
It was attempted, but again, nothing happened. He was hanged.
Yeah, but okay, so here we've got a few arguments that, hey, Canada's a stable democracy and has strong democratic institutions. It's all got a well-established rule of law and a political culture that values democracy. Well, I actually have to wonder whether any political culture values democracy these days. Nobody.
Yeah, especially the way a lot of these countries are going.
Yeah, you look at one of my morning commentators, and Mike Cushman, and he's saying he raises a perfectly valid question. If you only get 22% of people voting at local elections, how valid is the result? And particularly when that gets down to like 15% or 9% or even 6%. You know,
as I always say, I don't think any political party should have a 100% of the power and authority when they don't have a full majority, like they get less than 50% of the seats.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, and people have talked about there being differences between the system of first past the post, which we use here in America, in Britain, and many other Commonwealth countries use first past the post. Australia doesn't. Germany doesn't. Belgium doesn't. They use proportional representation-based systems. But again, whether you use first past the post or PR, generally speaking, most of those systems that we have of democracy means you only need to get 40% of the vote, not of all voters, by the way, 40% of those bothering to vote in order to get a majority in the House.
Or force them at gunpoint to go and vote, like they do in Australia.
Australia's I did some research into that one and I know the situation. Yes, 92% of people go to the polling station. Mm-hmm. Right? They collect their ballot paper, they screw it up, and they walk away.
Or they write on it, say, "I'm voting for myself," or "F you," or whatever.
Exactly. So only 72% of people vote in the Australian election, at the last Australian election. So I've done the research into Australia. So in fact, whilst there are two democratic countries in the world, Belgium and Australia, that force the vote. And essentially the same has happened at both of them. The poll isn't that greater than the rest of the world. We're at about 68% at our last federal election. We were down to about 50% at our last provincial election, and as I said, in Niagara Falls it was 26% at the last municipal
down
election.
to one person voting.
Yeah.
What'll happen then, Peter, if nobody voted? If there's an election called,
but it's like no. The thing is, so you get four candidates or five candidates in the constituency. They each go and vote for themselves, as do their wives and their party organisers. So they get 6 votes apiece. But hey, Joe managed to get a 7th vote. So he got in. So it's fair to ask how stable our democracy really is. It really is.
Yeah. Because I always ask, what would happen if an election were called and nobody voted?
Yeah. And
nobody ran.
Yeah. Nobody ran is even harder.
Yeah.
That actually.
Or one person would walk in and become addicted.
So the question here is, do we have political stability?
Sometimes I fear not.
Yeah. And here's the
right
thing.
Now, so many people, the more polarization, the more angry people have. Like, I think over nothing, basically.
Yeah.
I think basically what people have to do is to try to instill democracy in what's there. If they have an issue, to raise it or to organize a group that would bring forth concerns that they have that are legitimate concerns, rather than just saying, I don't like him. Oh, I'm going to vote for this guy because he's not Trudeau. Or I'm going to vote for this guy because he's not Polyev. Or whatever, like that's a stupid reason to vote. The reason to vote is people need to not only vote, but to participate in democracy. And people are less and less participating in democracy. And then when people do vote, they vote out of some kind of unimagined anger or frustration. Look what happened south of the border.
I prefer people vote that way. Go to the ballot box. Go to the ballot box and put that on the vote if you must. I prefer you do that than walk away and not bother voting.
Imagine if everybody did that.
Yeah.
Every single person in that riding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And say none of the above. And none of the above gets put
in the riding of
100%,
whatever Trudeau's riding is. The results as follows are: Trudeau, 19 votes. Other PC candidate, 19 votes. NDP candidate, 19 votes. None of the above, 39,162. None of the above are elected.
Yeah, and then they happen to have a political party called None of the Above Party. And the person running for that party gets in.
Actually, there is a None of the Above party, by the way, here in Ontario. There is a None of the Above party.
Yeah, we did some work for the guy who was the leader of that party, didn't we?
Yeah, and we have some potential changes that are happening here in Ontario, which could be interesting because a lot of the smaller parties are now actually joining forces. And it seemingly happened through a meeting that I attended last year, where some of the minor parties were saying, we're talking about what happens and changes to election law, and the fact that some of the minor parties are now looking at the possibility of getting to all 133 seats in Ontario.
Absolutely. And they're coming up with ideas like where they have some commonalities.
Yeah.
And they're trying to join forces.
Yeah. So we'll be looking forward to seeing what happens at the next provincial election. Okay, so here's another question for you. So we have political stability in theory. Okay, so let's go to see our democratic rights. They're protected by sections 3, 4, and 5 of the Charter, which gives democratic rights to the citizens. So basically every citizen has the right to vote, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the House of Commons, or there shall be no sitting of a Parliament and of each legislature shall at least once every 12 months. So you have to sit, you have to actually take part. There has to be a Parliament sitting. You can't vote for the Parliament and then Mr. Trudeau just can't cruise till the next election sometime in the fall of next year. There has to be sessions of Parliament at least twice between now and then. He could in theory, right?
Like he can prorogue everything.
Yeah.
And then just decide, oh, we're having an election.
Yeah. Okay, then the other one is no legislative assembly shall last longer than 5 years. But again, hey, does that stuff necessarily protect us from a coup?
Yeah. Like somebody could decide that, oh, well, I'm just going to Section 33 or whatever, we're going to override that. And I'm going to stay in power for the next 10 years.
Well, because the other thing to note is Section 4.2, and I'm reading. Let me read it from here. In the time of real or apprehended war, invasion, insurrection, a House of Commons may be continued by Parliament, and a legislative assembly may be continued by the legislature beyond 5 years if such continuation is not opposed by the votes of more than 1/3 of the members of the House of Commons or the Legislative Assembly, as the case may be. Now, so what if the coup comes from within the Legislative Assembly that refuses to step down?
That could happen.
Yep. So
That
essentially,
decide that they want to stay in power. Like, what about somebody like maybe south of the border? There was a gentleman, I forget what his name is, that he said that he might want to serve more than one term, more than 2 terms.
More than 2 terms. Well, in fact, remember, of course, that the wartime president Eisenhower, no, Roosevelt did. Roosevelt did. It was Eisenhower that followed Roosevelt. Yeah. But they soon after the Second World War, they put in the constitutional limitation of two presidencies. Right. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. Okay. So here's another reason. Canada largely supports democratic institutions. Right? Does it?
Some people
I think we've seen some changes to that kind of thing because and the reason I asked put the does it is because we've had some protesters in the last few years that seemingly don't bother about democratic institutions.
They don't care.
Yeah. We're going to take our trucks up and park them in the streets of Ottawa.
And we're going to occupy.
Yeah.
I remember the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Yeah.
A lot of us were supposed to occupy cities and everything else, but I think that these are the people that kind of transcended that.
They had an Occupy Toronto, but basically what happened is I think that it was Queen's Park or something, wasn't it? They just basically camped in Queen's Park.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Okay. And that might be an interesting experience.
They didn't get in anybody's way as far as I understood.
See, the G20 event, when they were protesting the G20, that was a big one back to, I think it was 2010. That was a big one when there's a lot of
another one. That was another one, yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of people helping. I helped out with some of the legal things.
But there's a difference. There's a difference between Occupy, an Occupy Wall Street kind of demonstration. Occupy.
Let's park your trucks there to take a convoy, and let's just stay until we get our way.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever read. There's a book out there called "A Very British Coup."
Oh, That
right?
must be a very polite one, is it?
Well, actually, interestingly, essentially what happened is there was and just because it happened, no reflection on the current government. A Labour prime minister was elected into power, and he had a massive majority. Hey, that's a similarity to what we seem to have today. And this individual basically chose that he was going to work at number 10 Downing Street. But since he was a Labour MP, a London MP, he was going to cycle from wherever he lived in London. Let's call it, one of the fairly close by Westminster. He cycles in from Westminster. There we go. The other side of the somewhere in Victoria, let's call it, right? So he's got a 5-mile cycle to work. Throws his bike into it, takes his bike into number 10 and works his way at number 10. Of course, the very British coup was that they couldn't really stomach that kind of thing because they couldn't protect the guy. And he did various things that, like, he refused a bodyguard, right? So therefore they had no choice but to operate a coup, and they got somebody within his own party to oust him and get rid of him. That's the British coup for you. Anyway, so do we support our democratic institutions? Essentially, what I was describing there, of course, about the very British coup, is that coup would come from within the House itself.
Oh yeah, that very frequently happens.
And for example, somebody, if we took the current government, for example, somebody usurps the Liberal Party and says, "Mr. Trudeau, bye-bye, you're gone."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It could be a group of liberals who are disenchanted.
Yeah.
Could be, whoever.
Yeah.
And then do whatever, and then, or they might just, enough of them could cross the floor to join another party.
That's another possibility, you see. Crossing the floor is not an impossibility in our political system. It has happened. That there are examples of it happening. Then there's not really any stopping it from happening. It's not quite the same in India, whereby what'll happen is one party pays one party wins the election and the other party basically pays off all those new MPs and say, join our party, we'll give you millions of rupees. So now
Back in the day, it was like that, like with John A. McDonald. There's a lot of that kind of stuff going on.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you saw some of the debates between George Browne and John A. McDonald.
No, I can't say I
like
have.
in Upper Canada, Lower Canada.
Yeah. I can't
It's
say
very interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I think we have it, and I think that the public is a bit repelled to some extent by Section 33 or the application of Section 33 of the Charter, which I don't even know why they have it.
Well, it bothers me. Section 33 really bothers me because I don't see it's I'm going to be blunt about this. Section 33, the notwithstanding clause, is unconstitutional and should be struck from the Charter.
Yeah.
There we go. Out.
Because what it is that our country's democracy, and I respect democracy until I say we don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? So I'm going to introduce Section 33 in whatever law which affects your speech, your assembly, your right to protest, etc., could affect your life, liberty, or security, or could affect even the equality clauses. And these are things that are, oh, Cheryl, yeah. These things are not good when you have the Section 33. But unfortunately, when we have these different things put under our charter, and we're looking at, and we have that, because right now, presently, there's a proposal to put Section 33 passed if the courts get involved in removal of homeless encampments.
Yeah, that's exactly, yes, you're right. Notwithstanding Clause Betty, that's exactly it. And we've been talking about them on Talking Niagara for quite some time, a little while. We had quite a bit about it about 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
My question is, how's that going to create affordable housing?
Quite.
That's what my question
And
is.
you see, I can see essentially it's not going to change the situation about there being problems with homeless, but what I can see arising out of it is essentially them building homeless encampments. It's like, yeah, we don't want it in our city. We're gonna buy off of a farmer somewhere on the outskirts of the city a 5 acre, 10 acre, whatever plot of land. We're going to build a toilet, a toilet and washroom on there, and
You know how they last.
sweep all of those, sweep all of those homeless people into that area. And if you dare to leave, the policeman's right here. I think that's what we're going to end up doing. If we deal with it through notwithstanding, right?
Yep, and this is one of the things that we have to be. We need to find housing, and this is the thing. I think some of the architects of this whole idea of this notwithstanding clause for the homeless is so that we don't have to deal with the homeless issue.
Yeah,
We don't have to actually make an effort to get housing. Maybe
yeah,
if the homeless were invisible, they'd be less of an issue. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen. You know that bank that moved down the 4th Avenue and now it's an empty building? The homeless
yeah,
will take over that, probably burn it down. And homeless will start breaking into buildings that are half empty. They'll start laying by themselves in businesses' doorways.
yeah.
They'll start using in other places of the public, maybe not in groups, but by themselves. And the likelihood of having more
Well,
people who are drug users dying and overdosing is going to be very high. And
Cheryl Rowe makes a point. They need to house them, not tear their encampments down. They have taken their IDs away as well, and
absolutely,
then I spoke to a nurse last night, and one day, one of my many meetings. Yes, absolutely.
yeah. And
Not to turn this into a discussion about homelessness.
yeah, yeah,
Right,
because
but
this is one of the
we
things
know
that,
that's
yeah,
one
and
of
this
the
is
worst.
one of the things where they would be Section 33 about the life, liberty, and security, which was like the court decision was. They didn't say that people can live in encampments for all eternity. What the court decision said is you cannot evict people from encampments if you do not have an alternative place for them to go.
It's the
Like indoor.
alternative place.
Yeah,
It's the alternative place.
housing, shelters, whatever. And if you don't have them, because the shelters are all full, they're all telling the media that they're all full, and many of them are over full.
Okay.
Yeah.
To get back on topic, by the way, and not that that's unimportant. That's a vitally important topic. But to get back on the topic
But
about,
think about it if people want to start using Section 33 about some other things, about a right to protest,
yeah,
about a right to freedom of speech,
yeah,
about a right to have a free press.
yeah, and all of those, we're going to abrogate those under Section 33.
Yeah,
That's what
because
I
it's
don't
starting
like
to
about
bother the
Section
party
33.
in power because we should have our own opinions and tell everybody what we think they should think,
Right.
rather than having a back and forth.
Yeah, and Cheryl, Frank Campion's not the only mayor that needs to be challenged on it. Yes.
Yeah. Matt Cisco, I helped you get elected.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with that.
Yeah, and Jim Diodati and the Fools as well.
Me too.
I didn't help him get elected. I'm campaigning against him.
know. You opposed him, yeah.
I utterly opposed him, like I do.
Yeah,
With
but
all
this
of
is the thing where we have to start looking at democracy. Okay, part of democracy is listening to everybody about these things.
Well, public sentiment is a major issue in that regard, and I think that we deal with the public largely supports. I put that thing. Okay, the public largely supports democratic institutions until it's convenient not to do so, I think, is
Yeah,
the bit
until I
that I
guess the
missed off.
democratic institutions decide that they don't want to be democratic institutions anymore.
And that is part of the problem. So, that's where the notwithstanding because becomes a problem, because that's no longer democratic.
Yeah.
And
What
I'm
about if they start saying that the military could be let loose and they could start
well, that was
rounding people up who are very disobedient or who protest too much against the government or
yeah.
who are known agitators or something like that. There are people that could start thinking that that's okay, and that's not okay.
Well, that is where our next area goes in: military and law enforcement. Basically, the Canadian these agencies are committed really to upholding the Constitution and the rule of law. And for military doesn't operate here locally within the Canadian border. Military is about protecting Canada from outside incursion, but law enforcement operates within the Canadian border, and they're committed to upholding the Constitution and the rule of law in Canada.
Yep.
Right. So
Yeah,
it's
and they also
important.
have rules that they have to play by. Like they can't be like if you're at a protest, like a cop are really not supposed to go into the protest and beat everybody up. That happens.
Yeah.
And
And Cheryl's right that she's concentrating on her municipality. We have a group that's dividing up in municipalities to stand up on all those issues and the municipal level. I'd love to talk to you, Cheryl, at some point as well,
yeah,
because
maybe
I
you
have
can come
similar
up
interests.
and talk to us. It'd be
Yeah,
very interesting because I'd be interested in seeing what I can do in St. Catharines because I'm very flustered by this issue.
yeah. I'm very interested in that as well. I think we haven't even investigated a tenth of what the issues that we could try to investigate.
Yeah,
Right?
and
That's right.
this is very serious because I think that this is if this is allowed through, what's next?
Yeah,
Whose rights
exactly.
are going to be attacked next?
Yeah. And that's exactly why I pulled no bones as to saying notwithstanding needs to be removed from the Constitution.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It was put into appease Quebec. There, I don't care.
Yeah. No,
Quebec,
Alberta wants to have its
Quebec, get out of it. Live without it. Obey the Constitution. That's
yeah.
it. Right?
Mhm.
I'm going to be blunt about it. If you don't obey the Constitution, you can get out.
Absolutely. Betty,
But
call
you're
the
going to have to
attorneys.
leave the
Call
car.
the office
You're
anytime.
going to have to leave the corridor south of the St. Lawrence River to allow us to build a superhighway to get to the East Coast that trucks everything in from the East Coast, because basically you're going to lose south of the river. Sorry.
Yep. Exactly. And also, there's a lot of indigenous in Quebec.
Yeah.
So if Quebec ever wants to separate, hey, good luck. Take 15% of the land and let the indigenous fight with you about the rest of it.
We're going to be moving office after the 27th of
I
December.
know we're going to be downstairs.
Right. Okay. Our Charter of Rights and Freedoms needs to be upheld. Yeah, and that's an important part of this, right? So here's a question. We're talking about military and law enforcement, and basically these are the organizations that are upholding the Constitution and the rule of law. However, we do have a question. We were talking about this just before we went onto the show. There's the question about the 2% GDP NATO commitment that Trump, when he was last in office, basically embarrassed half of NATO for underperforming. Not just Canada, but we were one of the worst nations, and we're still not at 2%.
I think Luxembourg, is behind us.
Well, Luxembourg, to be quite honest, given the size of Luxembourg, I would forgive Luxembourg.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Luxembourg is probably the one member of NATO that you can kind of say, well, hey,
Yeah.
you're talking about a population of less than 1 million people in Luxembourg.
See, I think what's happened is that we've become a very high risk world. Okay. Right now, like these military coups that have taken place, like in Niger, Syria, where are they all going? Where are the deposed leaders moving to? Russia.
And Cheryl raises a very important point. It's true, law enforcement has changed since the 80s. I have to actually ask the question because there's been a lot of, this is something we've been talking about on Talking Niagara. We're getting into the political realm in Talking Niagara, where we talk about politics every morning. One of the important increasing topics that's coming up is about store and business robberies and thefts, etc., and how many more people are breaking the law, how much more gun crime we have, how many more murders we have. When you think about it, we probably it was probably, if we had one murder in a decade in the Niagara region, that would be one murder too many. But now we're seemingly having murders every year in the Niagara region, and where's it going to stop? And this is
3 or 4 usually.
Yeah, and
it's just getting worse.
It's getting worse. Okay. So we're supposed to have a robust legal framework that protects against unconstitutional actions, right?
And this is why we have the Supreme Court, which is separate.
Yeah.
Okay? There's 2 ways that could be dealt with. One is through testing actions and testing cases as people go up the court and seeing whether that this should have been voided or not. And the other is reference case. So if a government wants to write a new piece of legislation, they can bring it to the Supreme Court of Canada for advisory to see if this is right.
Yeah,
Who are we hiring in the NRP? Good question.
We have to agree. There's way too many murders going on in this region. It should be this is a safe area to live. It really is. Mm-hmm. We're not like America in any sense of the thing. But who are we hiring in the NRP? Yeah. There's definite problems with the NRP. We have got major issues there, and that's a regional issue which needs to be addressed. And I think mm-hmm. It's a fair question at the next municipal election.
How police are being trained? Who are they being trained by?
Exactly.
What are their skills? What are their backgrounds? That sort of thing. I mean, I have a lot of respect for law enforcement, but I want to make sure that all the people in there are very properly trained and have the right background, the right resources. And same as our military, too, the same way. Yeah. But Robert Duppel's commentary, I think this is very interesting.
This one.
Yep. And don't mind that they're carrying the Sea Kings. Remember those helicopters?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Section 4.2, in times of unrest and apprehension, we talked about this, the legislature are going to extend their time beyond the original time.
And they can have a war cabinet. They did that in the UK.
And here's another question. So, being a member of various international organizations like NATO, and a Canadian group would likely, Canadian coup would likely provoke strong condemnation and potential sanctions from international organizations that could hurt us in a major way. Right, that's for sure.
Yeah, like so somebody even from within decided to say, we're going to start a major coup. I just got this book called Starting a Coup for Dummies.
I want that book.
I started reading. Yeah, I'll loan you my copy.
Is this written by by transitional Prime Minister Mohammed al-Bashir in Syria?
Yeah, he probably wrote a chapter or 2.
Yeah.
But anyways, that kind of thing, if somebody tried that, I'm sure there will be a lot because we're a member of NATO, because we're a member of
Yeah.
many different international treaties. There would be a lot of upset. Right?
Well,
Our head of our army is not the prime minister; it's the Queen's representative or Governor General. Right? We
yeah.
have kind of a strange
Well,
accountability and powers, which is weird in Canada.
that's interesting. So it's not the prime minister that decides to go to war. It's the king.
Yeah.
You said Queen. Like, just to be
Upon the
correct.
advice, of course, upon the advice of the prime minister. Right?
Yeah.
But this
You
is
said
it's
the
like
Queen.
having an election. Remember the King Byng affair?
Yeah.
Right? And it turned out they didn't have an election. They decided to form a different government instead. Right? So I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things that Governor General has power, same as the Lieutenant Governor at the provincial level. Right? So they do have some things. The Prime Minister can go in and say, "Oh, I want to start an election." They could be, say, if you got two party like a minority government, but you got two parties relatively the same amount of seats, there could be an offer done by two other parties to form a government as a kind of a
Yeah.
coalition or
Well,
party.
that
A
in
lot of
many
things
other
like that
in
happen in
many
different countries.
Yeah, in many other countries, like places like Denmark, that's exactly what happens. So an election occurs, and no party's got the magic number. I don't know. Let's call it 101 seats to actually make their particular parliament. Not one of them's got that magic number of 101 seats. So they start bartering with other parties about. Sometimes they're kind of bartering about what ministries that people will have in certain things, and
And the
other
same as
times
royal assent, same as
yeah,
royal
and other
assent
times
for legislation. The
yeah,
prime minister
exactly.
doesn't have the final word on it, nor does
Yeah.
parliament. It's the governor general.
Well, I was going to say, in those kind of organizations, though, they will barter about what policies may well come into play in this parliament. So in those countries where they have that ability to form coalitions, they might spend a few days or even a few weeks negotiating who the next prime minister is going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they
And
talk
if you
about
want
that.
to see, an example of that, go and look up a Danish series called Borgen. It's about the Danish Parliament, and actually, in there, the heroine of the thing is the fictional first female prime minister. Her name is Birgitte Neuberg. Interesting. I've just finished watching both the 3-season series and the follow-ups 5 years later, one season.
It's always interesting to
Follow-up.
watch these things
Right.
because
So that's about how other countries deal with the political process, about how they might negotiate a coalition, and probably the same occurred here. With there was no giving away because the NDP wasn't big enough. There was no giving away of ministries. In fact, actually, in the British system, there tends not to be a giving away of ministries.
mhm.
Betty's saying Arif Virani was not born in Canada. He came here in 1972. Then our PM talks about spies. Not sure where that's related
Lots
to.
of spies in all
We
countries.
do have,
Any parliament, there's a lot of that even under Harper's.
yeah.
It's just you have to keep track of it. That's why you have national security agencies.
Well,
To try to prevent it.
that
But
is
now we have this big brouhaha about foreign interference in elections, and they're trying to sort that out.
we certainly have had some issues in relation to the current Canadian government, but again, some of those that were supposedly Chinese have actually those that were supposedly supported by Chinese have actually stepped down.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of said, "Well, I'm as far as I'm concerned, I'm not controlled by the CCP." but it's to prove my innocence. I'm stepping down
Yeah,
and caused a
that happened
by-election.
to that one guy who was there, and he
There
did
was
do that.
one. I think Markham is one of the instances
Yeah.
early on in the Parliament. There was one instance in Markham,
hmm And
right?
this is where we always be having to be constantly on the vigilance to protect our democracy. It's not something that we can take for granted. Hey,
Okay.
filtration by
Cheryl,
corporations, yeah.
Cheryl has just raised a big bugaboo in my viewpoint, and it's something that is not covered by our constitution, and there's no Western constitution that stops this, unfortunately, and that is the power of the lobby.
Yes, and
Right?
in the US,
Lobby,
they even got
essentially, lobbying has
corporations where
always
money
occurred in Parliament.
equals free
Yeah,
speech and expression. And if your
yeah.
corporation is rich, they
A
can
lobby,
buy it.
yeah, a lobby is supposed to be, you know, Joey and his wife go to Parliament because they're particularly aggrieved about something their MP's going to do, or they've got a problem because they're being kicked out by their slum landlord who's a real bastard doing X and Y and Z, that type of thing, or they're being he's losing his job after being forced out after 50 years, etc., etc. And that's what really comes, and that's what a lobby was created for individuals to go to Parliament. The trouble is, and is particularly shown by the way the US Senate works, is lobbying has become a big business.
Yeah.
It's like, how much money, hey, I'm going to put lots of cash into your pocket if you support my thing.
And don't kid yourself, lobbyists currently sit as paid staff by taxpayers in Pierre Poilievre's office right now.
Yeah. And
I'm
that's
not
something.
saying this is a good or bad thing, but people have to be alert
Yeah.
about this stuff. Protect
Yeah.
our democracy.
Yeah. And okay, Betty's saying FIPA in 2014, this agreement binds Canada to terms of a minimum of 31 years. Do you know about this?
FIFA?
FIPA.
FIPA. Hmm.
I'm not sure I know what this is
Yeah, if
related
she
to.
can maybe give me an idea of what that
Yeah.
stands for.
Yeah. I don't really know much about this, but
So it sounds like something about an agreement of something.
You're not talking about the that what's that group? It's the 2030.
It's not a sports group.
That's been completely found. No. I mean the 2030. There's this conspiracy theory about 2030.
No.
Yeah, but anyway. Actually, Cheryl is saying FIPPA.
That's Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act, which is a legislation.
That's got nothing to do with that.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, it says Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement, or Foundation for. I just looked it up on Google. Google could be your friend. And what it is trying to bring in foreign investment and foreign promotion. And that could be good things, that could be bad things, depending on what you have. Again, this has to be monitored. We're not
in and of itself, it's not a problem, because in fact, actually, if you're supporting some business in Bangladesh by creating your products in Bangladesh, fine, I have no problem with it. I do have a problem with it if you can actually be support. If in order to buy Bangladeshi products, you have to buy them through China.
Yeah.
But again, we're getting onto
this is nothing to do with any kind of agenda thing or anything. But this has gone on since 2003. I don't know. No, that was before Harper, I think. Harper came in 2006.
Okay.
Who was ever in there?
Yeah, and in fact, it's an interesting thing. Okay, so
but it is interesting to raise that, because I think that people need to be aware of these sorts of things that are happening. But what it is where we're trying to treat people who are coming into Canada What I'm concerned about is when they buy real estate property and they use it as investment purposes. And then
Well,
many times they just let
actually,
them sit.
and
It's
and
called
again, one of the big areas,
properties.
yeah, one of the big areas where that has occurred, of course, Angela, is in being the Chinese buying out tons of real estate,
Oh,
and
yes.
there is more than 1.3 million homes unoccupied in Canada, and it's
Yep.
not just the Chinese. Let's be blatantly clear about it. There are
Yep.
many people who have said, and we only have to look at the state of landlord and tenant law here within Ontario, that basically, hey, I'll be honest, if I was going to be a potential landlord, I would not consider being a landlord in Ontario.
Good move.
I'd probably pick anywhere else but Ontario to be a
Yeah.
landlord in,
Yeah.
right? I'd be much
Because of the
better.
landlord tenant board
Yeah,
and its technical issues.
yeah,
But in terms of the
yeah,
empty units, our governments are saying the housing problem is a supply issue. It's not a supply issue.
yeah,
It's a financialization issue.
yeah,
And don't kid yourself, government people, many of them are real estate investors and are right investors, REIT, real estate investment trusts. They own
yeah,
these things and they invest in these properties. I think people have to investigate the people who we put in power to trust our tax dollars and our laws, and our rights. So
okay,
if you
so
have a landlord who's got 2,000 properties and he goes up there, are you going to trust them to look after tenant rights?
yeah, oh yeah,
So these are
absolutely
just
not.
examples, where we have to look after democracy.
Well, and okay, this is an area I don't know anything about. Cheryl was saying Dane City has been bought out by immigrants, and
That's a part of
they're renting the houses out. And again, there's nothing wrong with renting houses out. I'd prefer that housing stock be rented out than not be used at all.
and just
Right?
sat there, for investment purposes, like buying a
Yeah.
stock market or a Bitcoin.
Okay, so moving on to the next item that we had here, instances of political unrest and protests. Um, We've had them in this country. You were pointing out a few earlier on.
Yeah, these were the earlier ones, like Louis
Yeah,
Riel, and like historical ones, like the Red River Rebellion,
but they've
which
never,
Winnipeg.
but they've
Winnipeg has had
never.
lots of stuff, like a general strike, everything during the Depression.
But again, they've not escalated to the level of a coup attempt. And
No,
even if even if I took another a British
got
example,
stopped. Got stopped. He got charged with what do you call it? Sedition
yeah.
and
Well,
hung.
to go back to Britain, for example, in 1929, there was a general strike, which basically lasted 11 days. And on the 11th day, when they agreed to give up the general strike, there were more people striking than on day one of the general strike. But yet by day 12, they actually they cancelled the general strike. And I don't know precisely the details about it, but again, general strike may be political unrest. It's a protest, that's for sure. But at the end of the day, there's a negotiated settlement, and
Mm,
it's not raising to the level of a
yeah.
coup,
Yeah,
right?
because people, when they protest, there is a level between protest and then there's a level between committing any kind of crimes. Because you can't be hurting anybody when you're holding a protest and you're not getting in the way of traffic, you're not stopping others from doing business,
Yeah,
unless your intent was like mine when we tried to get the nuclear war industry to stop sending weapons out. But that was back in the day. Okay, there are different ways that people are now protesting where there's a very pro-Palestinian movement that's trying to divert or create an embargo with any Israeli trade. And then there's also an
well,
Israeli group trying to boot out the Palestinians. I mean,
yeah,
I
and
think personally that both sides have to get together and say enough is enough.
Enough is enough, yeah. And in that particular war, I have to say that it was wrong of Hamas to start that war, and what IDF have been doing in Israel and the IDF have been doing is also wrong.
Yeah, it's like, okay, somebody hit you with a paper clip or something, or that, so they're going to go out and take a sledgehammer and slam that mosquito.
Yeah, exactly, and that's something we can talk about in talking Niagara rather than on Spin Legal. Okay, so friendly protests are okay, but what's happening in the Canadian streets by chanters should never be allowed. Chanters.
Oh my God. Gotta bar these chanters. What are they chanting about?
I think the thing is that I remember when I was a kid seeing about protests that happened in London, and it was fine. It used to almost be a standard route from Hyde Park through to Trafalgar Square. Of course, the significance about Trafalgar Square, it's like 400 meters away from where Downing Street is. So if you shout loud enough in Trafalgar Square, Downing Street can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
If they haven't already left the country, which is probably what most prime ministers will have done by then, right?
Yeah. We used to have them at Queen's Park or at Parliament Hill.
Yeah.
Hey, and sometimes it was directed at a certain industry or company, we'd direct it at a company. Right? And it was very interesting because you can do things like that. We'd gone to a point of civil disobedience, but they were not, we didn't do any harm to any property or anything. Yeah. It's like people tying themselves up on the gates to prevent people leaving or delivering product. Okay. But not hurting anybody, not destroying anything. Okay? So things like that. It was very interesting back in the day. And then at the end of the day, then we would talk. We would actually meet with people and say, hey, this is wrong. We don't want to have nuclear war here. And we don't want to support the nuclear buildup. And this was back in the 80s during the Cold War. And this is how we have this.
Okay, so he's talking about immigration, right? And yeah, there have been people who've been complaining about immigration here in Canada, and yeah, let me point this out. Talking about caps on immigration right now, Betty, is not being racist, right? There are plenty of people out there who are saying, and many who've actually come from different backgrounds, and Indians, Singaporeans, Africans, etc., that are Canadians, that are saying now, we need to put a pause on immigration right now, because until we resolve some of the issues that we have in the country, we need that pause. But again, we're back into the political realm.
This is when Harper started a whole pile of people coming in because he wanted a whole bunch of economic immigrants in. But you know as well as I know that was a cab driver immigration program.
And Cheryl Rowe is pointing out that Brampton's a cesspool right now.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Don't get me started about Brampton.
Okay.
A lot of our cases are there.
Okay, so in terms of the next section, we were looking at charter rights, Charter Section 9 rights. Everyone has the right not to be arbitrarily detained or imprisoned. In terms of a coup, who would care? I'm going to
take over some small country, and become its dictator. Am I going to care what their constitution says?
Yeah, I'm going to bang you in. I'm going to bang you up in prison and leave you there for the next 6 weeks. I don't care.
Yeah. So I mean, this is the kind of thing. So the best protection you have against this is through laws, through your police force, through your enforcements, through your agreements with other countries, through things like NATO, through things like having good relationships with your neighbors. Okay. Try to get some positive relationship. We're not going to always agree with everything the U.S. does.
Yeah.
Okay? Like I think some people down there should be in a geriatric ward instead of having the nuclear boats. But
especially the latest one about Canada. Canada could be the 51st state. Mr. Trump, if Canada were going to be joining the United States, you've got to think of this. It won't be the 51st state. It'll be the 51st to 60th state of the Union. And just think about, this is 30 million people. You'll be talking about 15 votes for Ontario in the
40 million people now with all our
40 million people. Sorry. You'll be talking about 15 million people in Ontario, 15 million people in Quebec, right? Something like 10 million people in BC, some in those regions, right? Plus, so you've got to be giving 3 votes to, and maybe even some more
electoral college votes would be beginning.
And all those electoral college votes, it will change the whole. It will change the whole outcome of the electoral college.
Yeah, and not a whole lot of people in Canada, when they were asked, hey, like some people in Canada would have supported Trump if they were able to vote, but
clearly
minority.
They would.
There's always people. There's always people.
Yeah,
but the vast majority, 58% to 68%, would have preferred the other one.
Yeah.
Okay? And this is because we have a very different political culture here.
Yep. I'm not sure I could support either of them.
I know. Or none of the above again. None
of the above again in this particular instance. I need to be holding that piece of paper up again.
You're starting that forward party down there.
Yeah. Okay, so then the section 7 about life, liberty, and security of person. All right.
And that's also subject to section 33. Section 2, section 7, and section 15 could be thrown out by section 33 of the charter.
Yeah. So there's only certain limits on all of those, right?
Yep. Exactly. Like if they do a section 33, there is a sunset clause on it. It has to end after 5 years.
But again, it doesn't, because you can renew it in 5 years' time.
This is the problem, because people just do that. And this is why we have to keep an eye on it. Let's keep the politicians from doing that in the first place. Yeah. I actually fought back. They tried to do a section 33 in Alberta to prevent disabled people from getting compensation after they were they had the sterilization operations against their will, and then there was a lawsuit that went up. The premier at the time wanted to limit the compensation they can get by passing section 33. I started, as well as a few other people, we started an international or a national stink about it, and then he withdrew section 33. And that's what we need to do when they start doing this, start pulling these games. Yeah. Because it could be anybody else next.
And the other thing is, of course, is that we've got the rights not to be arbitrarily arrested or detained without knowing for the reasons thereof, right? But again, in a coup situation, how will that really play out? I'm not sure it would. You know, a military coup, for example, would just say, I'm sorry, we're taking over.
Think about the War Measures Act when that was implemented in Quebec in 1970. I was in Quebec when that was happening.
Yeah.
And there were military people, checkpoints.
Right.
That was scary. I didn't know what it was going on.
Really, they're sneakily trying to take the old age soon too. CCP maybe.
Yeah, that has to be also watched too. Yeah. I remember when Brian Mulroney tried to do it, and they had seniors who were members of the Conservative Party go on TV and tear up their Conservative Party membership. And he had to back down on that by a threat of de-indexation of old age security. We have to do something similar, and we have to stand up for that.
Well, and the interesting thing is that, you know, when it comes down to how we vote for our laws, that you've got to go through several readings. You've then got to go through the Senate. It's then got to be approved by the Governor General, and so when it's passed into law, and very rarely, you know, yeah, it's true that we modify laws. So a subsequent government comes in, you know, so the government of Angela puts in a whole load of laws, and Peter gets elected saying, I don't like Angela's laws. I think Angela's laws need to be changed. So what do? I amend 6 or 7 of them, right? But she's put in hundreds of laws, and I amend 6 or 7 of them that have got the worst and most foul things that I think need to be gone from those laws.
Oh
Right.
yeah, right.
And that's essentially what happens. So now Angela's party gets elected in the next generation, and they go, there's hundreds of laws that Peter wrote, and hey, we need to get rid of a lot of those laws. So essentially, we end up
And
with
it makes no sense. It needs to be developed. Things have to be incrementally brought to progressiveness, as opposed to just what they're doing in the U.S. right now. Every time, I guess, the Democrats put something in, then the Republicans get in and tear it apart and reverse it, and then the Democrats get back in and reverse and tear it apart, whatever the Republicans get in, regardless of the positive or negative of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I think what they need to do is start listening to the people and working on things that are more on a democratic basis, as opposed to circle of dizziness.
She put in there is an interesting question. Change it to the UBI. It's interesting. That's actually a very intriguing question. I did some work to analyze as to whether UBI was worthwhile or not, and I still am not undecided about UBI.
See, the problem with UBI is you can get, say, the liberals. They'll pass a law that will give everybody a decent sized UBI, and it'll work. People will enjoy doing things. They'll get some good economic benefits from it. And then later on, a conservative government gets elected and says, okay, everybody's going to get only $200 a month for UBI.
So what you're saying is basically the liberals come in, they say we're putting in UBI of $2,000 a month, and then subsequently the conservatives come in and say, we're cutting UBI to to $500 a month.
Yeah, like the CPP, the OAS, that stuff is constitutionally enshrined in the federal government. So I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah.
EI was actually, there were some issues with EI when they had that, and they changed the constitution to fix EI so that we were able to take some control over it.
Okay, so Betty's saying, does it matter your job? You have 25 years to get a pension. Some companies don't pay pension. Government 4 years and $2 million. Wow, sounds like a windfall to me.
It sounds like we all should run for parliament.
Yeah. Well, in fact, actually, shouldn't we all be elected once, survive 4 years, and hey, there's actually a thing in India.
I'm going to spend 6 years in parliament, and I'll get my pension.
Yeah. Well, there's a thing in India that is basically said about the Indian situation, that if you get elected for one term in the Indian National Parliament, you'll come out with enough money to ensure that your as yet unborn great grandchild has enough money to live on live in comfort for the rest of his life.
Wow, sounds like an aristocracy.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's been an interesting session.
Very interesting discussion, and I think that people should give us some feedback. I love the feedback we got today.
Yeah.
Hey, we got different people coming on and making comments.
We went off the topic about laws, about law, but still,
you're looking at it, and this is why I always say about, can a coup happen? Suppose it's possible. But sometimes you don't even need a coup to have your democratic rights infringed.
Yeah.
Okay? So exactly. Canadians have to watch and keep. It's not about vaccines or anything. What it is what kind of access do you have to your elected representatives? Can you talk to them? What kind of access can you do this sort of thing? We have to know, and that we have to be able to tell our elected representatives, no, hey, don't take that program away. We need that program. Yeah. Don't privatize the healthcare system. Don't put all the old people into nursing homes. Because if you took a vote among all the old people, they don't want to go to nursing homes. They want to stay at home.
Never in a million years would I go to a nursing home.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these are things that have to be discussed as community groups.
Yeah.
Like Cheryl was talking about doing some work in Welland. I'd like to see some work done here, and perhaps there could be some work done in the whole Niagara region to talk about some of these issues.
Yeah.
And yes, we should be resolving some of these issues. Like, let's get some housing for people instead of using laws to get rid of their rights.
Well, I would basically say one of the things that I talked about in my election in 22 when I was standing for municipal election
Mhm.
is that I believe that we need a vacant home bylaw. That basically what will happen is the owners of said vacant home will be written to, and they will be told, if you do not put your home on the rental market, do various things like putting it on the rental market, we will compulsorily purchase your home at
Mhm.
bottom dollar, the bottom
And they do have laws that they
dollar.
could expropriate your
Yeah,
property.
they do have those said
They're
laws.
already on the books.
And furthermore, what will happen is we will now put a homeless person in, or a group of homeless people into the home, and we will
Yeah, you'll
start
clean
to
it up,
resolve
paint
some
it,
of the
fix it,
homeless problems.
and put some homeless people in
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So that, in my view, was one of the ways in which we needed to resolve the vacant home problem and some
And
of the
also get the
homeless problem.
nonprofit sector back into the housing.
Yeah.
When you have a not-for-profit sector competitor, that will automatically work within the market as a market builds housing, not-for-profit builds housing. That will start keeping the prices under control.
Yeah. Okay, I heard they're getting a rough time with the elderly with government. Yeah.
I'd like to actually talk to St. Catherine's Council too, Cheryl, if you can give them my contact information. And
We
give
have 6 people from St. Catherine's in the group that will be standing up, researching, and will be addressing St. Catherine's Council. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
All
because
right.
I'll do it. And they know that I go there. I'm dynamite.
All right. I'm looking forward to seeing some further information. And I think what we're going to end up doing here is now we're saying, okay, bringing this to a close. We're at 1 hour and 12 minutes, so we've gone longer than any other program of
Yeah,
Spin
I
Legal.
think people were just very interested in our discussion.
Yeah, and it wasn't strictly legal. That's the thing
Yeah,
about
exactly. I think people like it when we talk about issues that are
yeah,
exciting, like that
yeah,
people are very like that people care passionately about.
yeah. Okay, so let's point this out that if you need some legal advice, you can contact us at 905-688-5598. So that's Invictus Legal LLP. And you can email Angela at angela@weareinvictus.legal or myself at peter@weareinvictus.legal, or go to our website, weareinvictus.legal. One more for a moment. Thank you all for the info. Yep, there you go.
Yep.
Most welcome, Betty.
Absolutely.
And this is Angela's favorite part of the show.
So what you've heard today on Spin Legal, whether this show or others in the series, and I'm saying I'm not talking about that book I recommended earlier about a dummy's guide to this not legal advice.
Yeah, a dummy's guide to coup d'etat.
It's not legal advice, but if you need legal advice, for anything at all, you need to contact a paralegal or a lawyer, and they could advise you on your own particular things. And yes, we can deal with charter issues, human rights issues. We can help you make city hall presentations, do different things, if you're upset about things. Okay? And it's great spending time with you guys.
Right. And yeah, and the point being is that I'm in terms of municipal stuff, I'm actually the person here at Invictus who deals with a lot of municipal law type actions. So if you need or know somebody who has that kind of thing, I can help. we're all kind of always we're very much a political firm.
Yeah,
Right?
well, we do a lot of things like we try to. It's not a partisan thing, but it's a nonpartisan political because we
Yeah,
try to take action, like we
yeah,
try to find solutions and push for solutions.
yeah,
Hey, wherever they come from, I don't care. I don't care who presents it.
yeah.
Hey, I want solutions.
All right. So thank you everybody for being here, and I wish you a good night, and we'll be back in a week's time.